Before it was a republic, before it was a colony, even before it was drawn on a map, there was a land lush and ancient where rivers wound through dense forests, where kings ruled, and where trade and war shaped lives long before the first European flag was ever raised. This is the forgotten story of what came before the Central African Republic. The Central African Republic sits right in the middle of Africa, landlocked, dense with forest and savanna, and home to rich river systems. But long before the idea of a Central Africa existed, this region was a crossroads of ancient peoples. For tens of thousands of years, hunter-gatherer communities, especially the Bokassa forest peoples, lived in deep harmony with nature. Their knowledge of the land was unmatched, their music and storytelling traditions vibrant and deep. They were later joined by waves of Bantu-speaking peoples migrating from the west and south, bringing agriculture, iron tools, and new political structures. Over time, these groups would give rise to powerful local societies, each with its own culture, dialect, and worldview. While the area we now call the Central African Republic didn't have large centralized empires like Mali or Songhai, it was far from disorganized. To the north, the Bagwirmi and Uwadai kingdoms, in present-day Chad, influenced trade and politics, often exerting power over their southern neighbors. Local sultanates and chiefdoms formed within the Cari region, especially along key trade routes and rivers like the Ubangi and Sanga. In the savanna zones, groups like the Bandia, Gabaya, Zande, and Nzakara developed vibrant communities with traditional leaders, warrior societies, spiritual rituals, and rich oral histories. But the land's isolation also became its curse. From the 16th to the 19th century, the region suffered a quiet devastation. Though far from the Atlantic coast and its transatlantic slave ships, the Central African interior was caught in a web of slave raiding driven by empires in the Sudan, Chad, and Darfur regions. Armed horsemen from Uwadai and Bagwirmi rode south, kidnapping men, women, and children. Others came from the east under Sudanese and Arab slave traders, who pushed deeper into the forest, exploiting river systems. Entire villages disappeared, societies were destabilized. Fear spread like wildfire. By the late 1800s, the region's population had dramatically declined, trade networks collapsed, and into this chaos stepped a new force, one flying the colors of Europe. In the late 1800s, European powers scrambled to carve Africa into colonies. France, seeking control over the interior, sent explorers like Pierre Savognon de Brazza and Jean-Baptiste Marchand to plant flags along rivers and sign treaties with chiefs, often by force or deception. By 1889, the French had established the post at Bangui, now the capital of Car. The region, though still not fully conquered, was declared part of the French Congo. In 1903, it was officially named Ubangui Chari, after two of its main rivers, but what followed wasn't development, it was exploitation. France's interest in Ubangui Chari wasn't in its people, it was in rubber, ivory, and timber. The colonial administration was thin and brutal. Large areas were handed over to private companies who used local people as forced labor to extract resources. These companies, like the famous Compagnie Forestière Songa Ubangi, used violence to control workers. People were whipped, starved, and sometimes killed for failing to meet quotas. Whole communities were forced into rubber collection, often under the eye of armed guards. Missionaries arrived to spread Christianity, often alongside colonists. Schools were few. Medicine was rare. Roads were built only to serve European interests. The local population was given little education and even less freedom. Resistance flared up but was crushed. One of the most famous rebellions was the Congo-Wara uprising between 1928 and 1931, led by Kanu, a spiritual leader from the Gabaya people. His message was simple: no more forced labor. His army used spears and machetes against French guns. They fought bravely, but after 3 years, the uprising was violently put down. Kanu was killed. Thousands died. As World War II began, the French colonies were forced to choose between Free France, led by Charles de Gaulle, and Vichy France, Nazi-aligned collaborators. Ubangui Chari, like many colonies in French Equatorial Africa, sided with Free France. One key figure during this time was a young man named Barthélemy Baganda, a priest turned political leader. He joined the French National Assembly and began demanding real reforms for the people of Ubangui Chari. He spoke out against forced labor, inequality, and racism. Baganda wasn't just a politician, he was a visionary. He dreamed of a united Central African Federation and believed Africans could govern themselves with dignity and pride. And slowly, change was coming. After the war, France began granting more rights to its colonies. In 1946, forced labor was officially abolished, though conditions remained hard. Schools expanded, infrastructure slowly improved, Africans were allowed to vote and form political parties. In 1956, Ubangui Chari gained internal autonomy within the French community. Bokassa became head of government and began preparing the country for full independence. He wanted more than just a free country. He wanted unity, dreaming of a Central African Federation called l'Afrique Centrale, bringing together Congo, Gabon, Chad, and CAR into one strong nation. But that dream never came true. In 1959, Bokassa died in a mysterious plane crash. Many believed it was no accident. His death shattered hopes for regional unity, but it did not stop the push for independence. What started as a land of ancient peoples, proud traditions, and natural wealth became a pawn in global greed, a place raided, exploited, and nearly erased. But the fire of resistance never went out, and as the sun set on colonial rule, the people of Ubangui Chari prepared to stand as a nation for the first time in their own name. Now we'll witness the birth of the Central African Republic, the rise and fall of emperors, coups, chaos, and how the dream of independence twisted into dictatorship. Freedom came with applause, the flag was raised, and the anthem played. The Central African Republic had finally arrived. But what came next wasn't peace, it wasn't progress, it was betrayal, ambition, and power games that tore the country from its path. This is the story of how independence gave way to empire and how one man's crown almost broke a nation. On August 13, 1960, the Central African Republic declared independence from France. The capital, Bangui, erupted in celebration. The national flag waved proudly, a new government was formed, but the man who had led the charge, Barthélemy Bokassa, was no longer alive. In his absence, his cousin and political ally, David Dacko, took the reins as the country's first president. Dacko was intelligent, cautious, and deeply connected to France. He tried to build institutions, promote education, and stabilize the economy. But from the beginning, the new republic faced enormous challenges: poverty, weak infrastructure, and political instability. Behind the scenes, France still held enormous influence, pulling strings from afar. And then came Jean-Bedel Bokassa. Bokassa was no ordinary man. A former French army officer, he had served in Indochina and Algeria before returning home. In 1966, he led a military coup, overthrowing his cousin Dacko. He declared himself president for life, then field marshal, and eventually emperor. Yes, in 1976, Bokassa proclaimed the Central African Empire and crowned himself Emperor Bokassa in a ceremony so extravagant it shocked the world. Inspired by Napoleon, the coronation cost over $20 million, a third of the country's budget paid with foreign aid, including money from France. He sat on a golden throne. His crown was studded with diamonds. Hundreds of dignitaries were invited, though most never showed up. The world watched in disbelief, but for the people of CAR, it wasn't just absurd, it was terrifying. Under Bokassa's empire, the country descended into authoritarian rule. He eliminated opponents, censored the press, and surrounded himself with a lavish lifestyle while his people starved. But it wasn't just corruption, it was violence. One of the most horrific incidents came in 1979, when over 100 school children were arrested for protesting against wearing expensive school uniforms manufactured by a company owned by Bokassa's wife. The children were reportedly beaten to death at the military barracks. Their families were silenced. The world was outraged. Even France, his longtime supporter, could no longer look away. Later that year, France launched Operation Barracuda. While Bokassa was on a trip to Libya, French paratroopers landed in Bangui and removed him from power. David Dacko was reinstated as president. The empire was dissolved. The republic was restored. But the damage was done. The economy was in ruins. Trust in leadership had shattered. The people were traumatized. What had begun as a hopeful young republic was now struggling to stand. In the years that followed, the Central African Republic became a carousel of coups. In 1981, Dacko was overthrown by General André Kolingba, who ruled under military law, then slowly transitioned to civilian leadership. A new constitution was drafted. Elections were promised, but often delayed. By the early 1990s, pressure from the international community and the people forced Kolingba to allow democratic elections. In 1993, André Félix Patisé became the first democratically elected president in CAR's history. It was a hopeful moment, but it wouldn't last. Patisé's government was marked by ethnic favoritism and economic collapse. In 1996-97, a series of army mutinies broke out in the capital. Soldiers hadn't been paid. civilians suffered, looting spread. To stop the bleeding, the international community stepped in. African peacekeepers arrived, France sent troops. A fragile peace was brokered. Patasset remained in power, but the cracks were widening. Then came Francois Bozizé, a general once loyal to Patasset who turned against him. In 2003, Bozizé marched on Bangui and seized power while Patasset was abroad. Another coup, another regime change. Bozizé promised elections, he promised peace, and for a while, things seemed calm. But in reality, the country was deeply fractured. Entire regions, especially in the north, were beyond government control. Poverty was widespread, corruption ran deep, and rebel groups were growing restless. In 2013, a coalition of rebel groups known as Seleka stormed the capital and ousted Bozizé. The man they installed as president, Michel Djotodia, became the first Muslim leader of a predominantly Christian nation. But his rule triggered a new nightmare. After years of political instability, the Seleka takeover ignited sectarian violence. Christian militias known as anti-Balaka rose up in response, and the country spiraled into civil war. Communities turned on each other. Villages were burned. Thousands were killed. Nearly a quarter of the population was displaced. The streets of Bangui ran with fear. The UN called it a humanitarian catastrophe. France and the African Union sent peacekeepers. Eventually, Djotodia stepped down. A transitional government was installed, but the wounds were deep and the trust was gone. By the mid-2010s, the Central African Republic was a shattered land. Its institutions were weak, its people were traumatized. Armed groups controlled vast territories, and foreign mercenaries were beginning to move in. The international community tried to help. Peacekeeping missions were deployed, elections were held, but violence fled again and again. CAR wasn't a failed state, but it was fragile, incredibly fragile. And yet, hope still flickered. In 2016, elections were held, and Faustin Archange Touadéra, a former prime minister and mathematics professor, was elected president. He promised to rebuild, to reconcile, to finally bring peace. But the past would not let go so easily. From flag-waving independence to a self-proclaimed emperor, from military coups to religious war, the Central African Republic has seen more change in 60 years than many nations see in centuries. But the story isn't over. Next, we'll explore how KIR continues to fight for peace in a world of mercenaries, mines, and power struggles where the future still hangs in the balance. They called it independence. They called it a republic. But for the people of the Central African Republic, the fight for true freedom has never ended. From foreign fighters to resource wars, from peace treaties to betrayal, the modern story of CAR is a brutal struggle between survival and hope. This is the final chapter in a nation still learning how to rise. By the time Faustin Archange Touadéra took office in 2016, CAR was barely holding together. Entire provinces were controlled by armed groups. There were at least 14 major militias, each carving out territory, some with ethnic motives, others for profit. The government's power often did not extend beyond Bangui, the capital. More than 600,000 people were internally displaced. Another 500,000 had fled to neighboring countries. Roads were dangerous, aid groups were constantly under threat, and peacekeepers, over 12,000 strong under the UN mission called MINUSCA, struggled to keep the fragile peace. The root cause? Power, poverty, and gold. The Central African Republic is rich beneath the soil. Diamonds, gold, uranium, timber, the land is full of it. But that wealth has rarely reached the people. Instead, it has fueled conflict. Militias seized control of mines and trade routes. They taxed truckers, smuggled diamonds, and sold timber on black markets. In return, they bought weapons, paid fighters, and expanded their power. The government, weak and cash-strapped, could not compete. Even soldiers went unpaid. Foreign companies, some from China, others with shadowy ties, cut deals with warlords. SAR wasn't just poor, it was being stripped. In 2017, the situation shifted again. The CAR government turned to Russia for help. In exchange for access to mining rights, Russia sent military trainers and security forces. But these weren't just soldiers, they were part of the Wagner Group, a private military contractor linked to the Kremlin. Wagner fighters began guarding mines, training soldiers, and accompanying government offensives. They helped Touadéra push back rebel groups, but they also brought new controversy. Reports surfaced of human rights abuses, torture, and killings. Journalists who tried to investigate Wagner's operations in CAR turned up dead. Villagers spoke of fear and control. Wagner wasn't just fighting rebels, it was planting roots. CAR had traded one danger for another. In 2020, Touadéra sought re-election. But rebel groups, angry at being excluded from peace deals, united under a new banner, the Coalition of Patriots for Change, CPC. They launched a campaign to disrupt the election and topple the government. Fighting broke out across the country. Cities fell, roads to Bangui were cut off, the government was under siege. With help from Wagner, Rwandan troops, and UN peacekeepers, Touadera held the capital and won re-election. But the cost was high. Tens of thousands fled. Human rights groups sounded the alarm. Rebels melted into the countryside, vowing to return. Kr was still at war with itself. In the years since, the presence of Russian influence has only grown. Wagner guards the presidential palace. Russian music and posters appear in Bangui. Gold and diamond concessions are handed to Russian-linked companies. To some, Russia brought stability. To others, it replaced one form of control with another. France, CR's former colonial ruler, withdrew its troops in 2022, accusing the government of turning away from democratic norms. The European Union suspended training programs. Western influence faded. SAR, it seemed, had become a pawn in a new global chessboard, caught between East and West, wealth and war, power and people. And yet, the people endure. In markets and villages, in classrooms and churches, life continues. Farmers return to their fields, teachers rebuild schools, women lead reconciliation efforts, youth organizations campaign for peace. Despite chaos, elections were held. A new Truth and Reconciliation Commission was announced. The government proposed changes to the constitution, sparking debate but also civic engagement. Civil society, though often targeted, remains vocal. Radio stations broadcast messages of peace. Musicians write songs of unity. Children still dream. Because the people of Kar know one thing. No foreign fighter, no politician, and no warlord will ever define who they are. The Central African Republic is not just a conflict zone. It's not just a forgotten country in the middle of Africa. It's a nation of survivors, a place of beauty and spirit. Yes, its history has been brutal. It has been betrayed by emperors, warlords, and outsiders. It has seen its hopes dashed more times than most, but it has never stopped fighting to rise. And its story isn't over. From ancient kingdoms to colonial scars, from military coups to imperial fantasies, from civil war to foreign mercenaries, the Central African Republic has faced everything a nation can face, and still it stands. If this story moved you, hit like, comment, "We stand with Kar," and subscribe for more untold histories from forgotten places. Because the world may look away, but stories like this remind us every nation matters.